Hello, wrestling fans. This is Sal Rough Cuts reporting in from Orlando, Florida. Hope everyone is safe and well during this time. And this week's edition of Rough Cuts, I'm going to do a wrestling spotlight on a legendary wrestler. He's still very much alive, but he just recently had a birthday. And I wanted to do a very nice special tribute to this incredibly gifted, talented performer. His name is simply Wonderful. He's a wonderful man. If you don't know who I'm talking about, it is Paul, Mr. Wonderful Orndorff. He just recently, October 29th, celebrated his 71st birthday. God bless him. Paul, happy belated birthday. Please be advised, these are my opinions only. They have nothing to do with Bill Apter, OneWrestling.com, or the WWE. Again, Paul just had a birthday, and just wanted to do a nice little spotlight for you on him. Maybe you don't know much about him, and give you my thoughts of when I watched him perform. He debuted back in 1976. Was when he started. Now, before he started wrestling, he was a football player for the University of Tampa. He had over 21 touchdowns and 2,000 yards. He actually was drafted in the 12th round by the New Orleans Saints with the 289th pick, but unfortunately he failed a physical. He failed another physical with the Kansas City Chiefs, and he went on to play for 1 year with the Jacksonville Sharks of the World Football League before focusing his attention on professional wrestling. His first title, believe it or not, yes, he was a world champion. He was a tag team champion. He was a champion throughout his career. He started in '76. His finale was technically in 2000, but that's inaccurate. We'll get to that later. He wrestled 24 years, but his first title was the NWA Southern Heavyweight Championship. He beat a young Jerry Lawler, and he spent the first 6 years of his career down wrestling in the South and the territories in the Mid South NWA territories, doing what Mr. Wonderful does. He was known for his physique. That's what Paul was known for. He wasn't Mr. Wonderful yet. Now, he came up as Paul Orndorff. He was just known for his incredibly gifted physique, his persona. He was a face and a heel. He went back and forth just like he did during the WWE, WWF days. But he was a presence. He was a solid presence, and of course, you know what's going to happen is WWE headquarters, Vince McMahon, and them are going to take notice. And by 1983, Paul was working for the WWF, which is what it was known at the time. And Paul hired the rowdiest one in the world, the biggest heel at the time, next to Ric Flair, who was in the NWA. But as far as the WWF was concerned, he hired the biggest heel in in the world at that time, for at least for the promotion. And I think like I said, next to Ric Flair, hired Roddy Piper, and Roddy Piper gave him the nickname Mr. Wonderful. So we owe the late Roddy Piper with crediting the moniker Mr. Wonderful. They teamed up, and this whole thing was leading on with the feud with The Rock and WrestleMania. This was right around their building up in '83, coming a year later for WrestleMania 1 with Cyndi Lauper, The Rock and Wrestling Connection, which main evented. It was Hogan and T, which snuck on the outside against Paul, Piper, and Orton on the outside, and Muhammad Ali was the outside enforcer, and Pat Patterson was the in-ring referee. But during the build-up, Paul was being Mr. Wonderful. He had this incredible physique and, doing his thing and building up. And then WrestleMania 1 happened. And inadvertently, Cowboy Bob Orton had the cast knock Paul Orndorff out. And subsequently, Piper and Orton blamed Orndorff for the loss, that he was the weakest link. And subsequently, their feud began. You can look for it on YouTube, the WWE Network, Coliseum Video. You will find it. The Madison Square Garden had the match with Piper and Orndorff, the fallout from WrestleMania 1. It ended in a no contest because Cowboy Bob interfered. I it was kind of there was blood involved. Yeah, there was some crimson involved in it. But this started their feud for the local metropolitan area for a while. But he was Mr. Wonderful and known for that presence. And a lot of question was Paul better as a face or as a heel? Well, we'll get to what happened when he became a heel. In the beginning, as he was a face, they took to him. The fans loved him. Bobby Heenan was frustrated, did not like him, and put a bounty on him, and everything was unsuccessful. And then Adrian Adonis started calling Paul out for aligning himself with Hogan. And you know what happens when you align with Hogan? Bad things happen. You know that's going to lead into something. And what it led to, which was the biggest heel turn on television at that time. I mean, I don't know if the biggest. I mean, it was one of. I'm gonna say it was one of the biggest because I thought Larry Zbyszko and Bruno Sammartino was the biggest turn when Zbyszko had his match with Bruno on TV, and then Zbyszko got frustrated, and they ended up settling it in a cage with Bruno winning. It didn't make that kind of money that Hogan and Paul generated, but I think that Bruno and Larry was the biggest one was big in terms of heel turn because of the student disciple. This was more 80s where Hogan and Paul teamed up. They had some tag matches and then it culminated on TV. Hogan and Paul against Bundy and Stud, which led to Paul turning on Hogan, which led to their series of matches for about a year and a half. It was, like I said, I felt still to this day that Larry and Bruno, it was a bigger term, but profitability wise, it was more for the WWF at the time. It was very profitable with Hogan and Orndorff. They had their biggest match in Canada, which was known as the Big Event. I don't know if you remember this, but this was the big. It was the Big Event in Toronto, an outdoor event for 76,000 people that main evented, and Paul was unsuccessful in getting the title. It didn't end there. It end culminated with them having a national match on Saturday night's main event in a cage. They hit the floor together. It was declared a draw. The match was ordered to restart. Hogan hit the leg drop and then walked out. And subsequently, this ended about a year and a half feud. It was the most profitable in WWE history at the time. For that time frame, it was more profitable than Zbyszko and Bruno. But I still think Bruno and Zbyszko was a bigger shocker than anything else. I don't think anybody anticipated it. I think everybody at that time kind of saw what was going to happen with Paul and Hogan because that's just what happened in those days, and you knew it was coming. But it was they put on a series of really good matches. My disappointment with the feud was I really truly felt that Paul Orndorff should have had a title run. I really felt, even if Hogan got it back a couple months later or so at a pay-per-view, maybe a Survivor Series or something, I always wanted to see what Paul could have done with the belt with Heenan and see what they could have really, you know. But again, at that time, Hogan is the big money draw. It's Hulkamania. It's running wild. Yeah, you're not going to pull the belt off of Hogan. But I kind of personally wanted, to this day, felt that Paul should have had a title run with the belt. But I understand from a business standpoint, Hogan was just very hot and the biggest thing in wrestling, and you couldn't do it. So once it ended, what ended up happening is Paul was injured for real and had suffered an arm injury, and things kind of took a turn where Paul had to leave and come back, and he had Oliver Humperdinck's imagine things. It wasn't the same. So it kind of his popularity or his presence kind of slowly died down a bit. He did take some time off, but he recovered and he came. He went to WCW in '92. Hogan and him crossed paths later on for the first time in a while since the WWF, WWE days, but it wasn't nearly anywhere near what they had. But I guess was more nostalgic than anything else. So the arm injury was real. He did have surgery, had neck injury. It was ultimately a neck injury in 2000, and the recurring injuries that he had that ultimately put Mr. Wonderful on retirement. And it was kind of sad, but 26 years that he had, he was big in the '80s. He had memorable matches with Tito Santana, Don Morocco at WrestleMania 2. I know people seem to forget about it, but I would him, Orndorff and Morocco probably could have had a few more matches together. I would love to see, Paul and Savage go for a while when Savage had the belt. There was plenty to do either as a face or heel. It was just to try to find that identity. Yeah, he was better as a heel because he had that arrogant personality, and he was well managed by Heenan. And then in WCW, it just wasn't. It wasn't the same. He was still Mr. Wonderful, but it was the way it was presented was not the same. And you could tell at that point his career was winding down. He was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2005, which was basically the class of WrestleMania 1. Hogan was a part of it. Iron Sheik was a part of it. Nikolai Volkov was a part of it. Piper was a part of it. Orton, they were all, that was basically the WrestleMania 1 contingent, was a part of it. The only one missing from WrestleMania 1, really, my opinion, I mean, outside of Snooker and all, but Cyndi Lauper, should have been a part of it, and still to this day I stand by it. But again, for the subject of Paul Orndorff, yeah, he was inducted, and deservedly so, and he was inducted by Bobby Heenan, and rightfully so as well. He had a very, very prominent career, a very illustrious career. He did come out of retirement. I did look this up in 2017 at the age of 67. He won a six-man tag match in Canada under the Canadian Wrestling Elite. I don't have the details of who he wrestled with or what the deal was, but at 67, he came back and he wrestled 17 years after retirement. Yes, he did work in the WCW power plant for a few years and developed wrestlers and all, but his in-ring career was over at 2000. But what a career he had when he started with, winning the NWA championship against Jerry Lawler in the South and rose to fame, had the moniker Mr. Wonderful, which he carried to this day. I call him Mr. Wonderful for a couple reasons. Number one, he was wonderful. As a wonderful wrestler, incredible physique, a presence about him that when he got in the ring, he was truly old school. He could do anything and everything in that square circle. He could do things that wrestlers could never do. He was truly wonderful. Maybe the storylines and things didn't play out the way they should, but he went in the ring, he gave you 1,000% plus. And that is something that you can't teach. You either have it or you don't have it. And I think a lot of it came down to his discipline in college football at the University of Tampa. It showed in the ring. He was a very disciplined wrestler, performer. His promos showed he really went out there and either made you love him or he made you hate him. But he was better as a heel. There's no doubt about it. He was better as a heel. So that's one of the things I think that made him Mr. Wonderful. Another thing was he survived cancer. And as you know, it's well documented. He battled cancer. He survived it. Again, he just had his 71st birthday. God bless him. God bless him. Mr. Wonderful, if you ever see this, you are Mr. Wonderful. You will forever be Mr. Wonderful. Cancer did not beat you. You showed it that you were even bigger and more wonderful in it. And he's alive and well and doing very well in remission today. And many, many more happy years with your life and whatever it is that you're doing in retirement. You are truly something special in that regards. And also, here's something that's very noting of why I think he's even more wonderful. He's been married since 1971, nearly 50 years of marriage to the same person, and he has children. You think about a time in the 70s and 80s and going forward, a wrestler that looks like Paul Orndorff could probably have tens of thousands of women. Look at his physique, his looks. Yes. a great-looking man, and yet loyal. That's what makes him Mr. Wonderful. You can't say that about many performers. Paul Orndorff was about as loyal to his family as you could imagine. 50 years of marriage coming up next in 2021 for Paul Orndorff. That is wonderful. That is more wonderful than anything that you could ever accomplish. Very few wrestlers can actually say that they've been married that long. Rick Rude was married. Look at Rick Rude, how incredible good looking he was. He could have had women galore. He left his wedding band on underneath when he wrapped his tape around. Married until the day he died. Hacksaw Jim Duncan, been married. Beautiful Bobby Eaton, been married to Donna Dundee forever. Oh, I know we talk about the negative and a lot of the infidelities in the business, but let's not take away people like Paul Orndorff, the Rowdy Pipers, the Bobby Eatons, Rick Rudes of the world, Kevin Nash, who's been married, Bobby Heenan, married to the same person until he died. These guys, these men and women too, are wonderful in the regards that they stayed loyal to their spouses when many others were not. Paul was wonderful because he may have been Mr. Wonderful in front of the camera, but when he came home to his wife and children, he was still Mr. Wonderful. He was a loyal, loving husband and father till this day in 2020. And on behalf of Rough Cuts, Mr. Wonderful, if you ever see this, Paul, happy 71st birthday and congratulations on your upcoming 50th wedding anniversary in 2021. May you have many more happy, healthy years ahead of you with your wife and your children, grandchildren. And your Hall of Fame induction 15 years ago was well deserved and well honored. You earned it, and you will forever in every wrestling heart's mind be known as simply as wonderful. For this edition of Rough Cuts on this Wrestling Spotlight on Paul Orndorff, may all of your matches be a main event, and please be safe during these trying times with the epidemic. Take care. God bless. Have a good one.